Hi, my name's Greg Hoover, and this is our fourth installment of Fishing Knots Tied and Untied, where we're just taking a little closer look at some common knots and see how they're, not only how they're tied, but what holds them together, and just kind of comparing one knot to another and seeing how they hold up. So this time we're talking about why knots fail. And we're talking mostly about the knot that ties your fly to your tippet. Obviously, this is not a fly and this is not tippet line. But we're talking about that particular knot, the last knot from reel down to your fly, the last knot that you tie. But a lot of what we'll talk about with these knots also applies to other knots further up the leader, blood knots and surgeon knots and things like that. So there are two primary ways in which knots can fail. One is simply slipping. They unravel, they don't stay together because there's not enough friction in there to keep them together. So the simple overhand knot, it didn't break. There's no broken piece of tippet of fly line here on the table. It just simply unraveled because there weren't enough twists and turns and friction in there to keep it together. So it slipped before it had a chance to break. And breaking is the other way that knots fail us. Where, so for instance, you tie a clinch knot and you cinch it down and you pull real hard and pull real hard. I didn't cinch it all the way down, but you see the clinch knot and you pull and pull and pull, and that clinch knot is probably not going to slip. It's going to stay intact, and it's finally just going to break because you've pulled so hard. Because contrary to what a lot of people might think, a knot does not strengthen a line, it weakens the line. The knot is the weak point in that line. And so, if you've got a knot and you're pulling, the line is probably going to break somewhere in that knot. It won't normally break out here on the line, unless there's some sort of random weakness, weak spot, and that certainly happens sometimes too. But a knot does not strengthen a line; it weakens the line at that spot. So when you pull the line, you'll see videos where they've attached a line to a machine and they pull it and it breaks at, let's say, 10 pounds of pressure. Then they'll put a hook and somehow tie a knot to attach it to the machine, and then they'll pull like this, and then when it breaks, it's almost always the knot that breaks. It'd be pretty unusual for the line out here to break, but usually knot breaks. And so if the knot breaks at, say, 9 pounds of pressure, then that's a 90% break strength that kind of knot has. Because 9 pounds is 90% of 10 pounds. So we, in fishing, in particular in fly fishing, we want knots that will not slip before they break. Breaking happens, that's inevitable. You pull hard enough for long enough, and that knot is going to break. Breaking is inevitable, and it's just part of it if you pull hard enough. But slipping, a knot unraveling, that is unacceptable. We do not want that. We want knots that will break because they did not slip. And so kind of a rule of thumb here, I think, is that your last knot, your fly to your tippet, ought to have a break strength of at least 80%, and maybe preferably even in the 90s% of your line's overall strength, because that last piece of your leader, that tippet material, is so fragile that you need a high break strength knot to take advantage of every little bit of strength that's in this line. So that last knot will be, and it should be, your weakest point on your line. So that if you get hung up and you break something off, it breaks here, not way up here on the leader somewhere. So this last knot will be and should be the weakest point in your line, but we still try to make it as strong as possible. So another detail about knots breaking is that sometimes you'll see that the line will break right above the knot, not in the knot, but right above it. I was watching a video the other day of a fishing knot being tightened by a machine, and it was very slow motion and very close up, and it finally broke right there, right above the knot. Now, some people will see something like that sometimes and they'll say, man, that knot was strong. It's over 100% of the strength of the line. That's not physically possible. I guess maybe if you doubled the line over and ran it through like a Palomar knot or something, but you know, a knot is not going to be stronger than the line that it's made of. So what probably happened when that knot, and I think it was a clinch knot or something like a clinch knot, when that clinch knot broke right above the knot, what probably had happened was that when that clinch knot was wrapped and it was tightened down and it's pulling and pulling and squeezing and pulling, and that last little bit of line that's finally uncovered by the knot pulling down has been scraped and pushed and bruised enough that it's probably weakened a little bit. And so sometimes in those kind of knots, you'll see it break right here. So it wasn't the knot that broke, but it was the damage that the knot caused in being tightened that broke. So I think a lesson from that is if you're tying a clinch knot, just do 5 or 6 wraps. You don't need to do 10 or 15 wraps. That would be a waste of time and might even be damaging your line with that many wraps as it gets cinched down at the hook eye. It's kind of like fertilizer in a garden where a little bit isn't enough, but a lot will kill your tomatoes. And so you try to find that sweet spot between too little and too much. And the same thing applies to wraps on a clinch knot. More is not always better. Find that sweet spot, the perfect spot. And probably for a clinch knot, it's around 5 or 6 knots or 5 or 6 wraps. You'll sometimes see this, online how to use your hemostats to do a clinch knot, and I always have a little bit of trouble because I tend to fling my my loop off my hemostats. Another way to do that is to just put it right there and just wrap around like that. Make sure your hook stays down where it's supposed to, but just wrap around like this. You don't have to fling it unless you just want to. You can even use your finger and wrap around your finger, although you got to look out for that little fly that's on there trying to grab your finger. But you can even do that, and then you've got a big old loop there to just poke your tag in through. So that's a little side note there about using the hemostats for that. But you can imagine having 10 or 15 wraps and tightening that down, and those wraps just scraping and pushing all the way down that line. And so it might even do more harm than good to have too many wraps on a clinch knot. So I tend to prefer, maybe an improved davy knot that I've been using for a bit here. I claim to have invented it. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but you tie this davy knot pretty quick and easy, but then you poke that tag end up through this top loop. But what I like about this kind of knot, or like the orvis knot or a simplified orvis knot, is that it's just a small figure 8 with a line running through it. So you don't have to damage your line. You just tighten it down and then pull the tag in to tighten that knot, and pull this again and pull that tag end, and you clinch it down that way rather than that long scraping tightening that a clinch knot does. Although I have to say that one of the strongest knots out there is the trilene knot, which is very much like a clinch knot. It's basically a clinch knot, but you add this extra loop at the base So run your line through your eye of your hook twice, and then tie your clinch knot, you know, and just stick your tag in through both that little loop and the teardrop shaped loop that's there as well. Tighten it down, and that's, you know, 95 to 99% break strength. So if you're looking just for the strongest knot, probably that trilene knot is the thing to do. So the point there is that tightening and scraping as it tightens down doesn't always injure the line, weaken the line, but it can upon occasion. So that's breaking. Now, slipping. Knots will tend to slip if the hook is thick and the line diameter is thin. If there's kind of a mix match where, you know, from thick to thin, you've got a thick hook, you know, kind of heavy, robust hook, but a thin line. If there's a difference in that, the size of the hook, size of the line, there's going to tend to be slipping. And to test the tendency to slip, one thing you can do is take a fat hook, a hook really larger than you would normally fish with, like this one, and tie, you know, you could tie 1X or you know, whatever. I've got some 4X here just because that's what I had handy. And, you know, I tie a davy knot here. Having a little bit of trouble, and I know you're having trouble seeing it, but trust me, no, don't trust me. Let me see if I can't see it. So I brag about how easy a davy knot is to tie. It helps if you can see your line. I need a dark background here that I don't have. There's the top of it, I think. Yeah, there it is. So I got it there. So there's a davy knot on this big old beefy hook that's bigger than I would normally fish with. Now I'm going to mark right here, not the tag line, but the main line, the running line right up against the hook, just so I can see where it is. I've got blue all over my fingers there. So, you know, you've got a 4X line, which is pretty small for this big old beefy hook. Tie it down and tighten it down as much as you can, and then pull. And let's see what it does. Pulled loose. See where the blue is, and it's got all that pigtail left after it. That pulled loose, the 4X pulled loose on that big old beefy hook. Now, and that's just to illustrate the fact that a big hook and a small line. Now, if I took, I've already tied some 4X to this smaller hook. It's like a size 4, I think, kind of a little bit heavy size 4. I've already marked the blue right there, but see, that's sliding too. It just slid right out as well. Felt a little harder to me, but it slid out as well. Now here's some 4X tied to a size 14 hook, and just to give that a shot, see what happens. See if this digs into my finger or not, but let me pull that. Oh my, I heard it, first of all, it broke. It didn't slip. You know, there's just a real short, that's where the knot was. I heard that hook hit the ceiling and bounce somewhere in the kitchen. So could be in trouble over that one. But the point was that smaller, as the hook got smaller and smaller and smaller, finally when it kind of matches up pretty better with the line, the hook, the knot doesn't slip. It stayed intact until it broke. So a davy on a reasonable sized hook, a davy knot on a reasonable sized hook for the line that you're using, doesn't slip. But if it does have a tendency towards slipping, and you can see that tendency when you use those bigger, beefier hooks that you might be too big to normally to fish with. An improved davy that I've talked about a little bit, where you tie it just like a davy knot, but then you poke it up through the hole here. When I've tied that using 4X tippet on this big hook, it, like I did 4X, like I used just a minute ago, it doesn't slip. It breaks. So the davy slips when you tie 4X on this hook. The improved davy does not slip. It breaks because it just got that extra twist in it, and tightens, got a little more friction. So it's less prone, the improved davy is less prone to slipping than the traditional davy is. So of course the davy knot, improved davy doesn't slip on this, doesn't slip on this, and certainly doesn't slip on that smaller hook. So I think the moral of the story for all of this is that a thick hook and a thin line will tend to slip. But if you can close that gap, so you've got either a smaller hook or thicker line, or both, and get them closer to each other, that will hold, that will not slip, and it'll stay intact until it just breaks. Also, we want our knots to have a high break strength. We want them to not slip, and we want them to be fast and easy to tie. There's no knot that will do all three of those. There's no knot that is the fastest to tie, that will not slip, that is the strongest. You have to kind of choose which one is more important. Am I more interested in a fast and easy tie, or am I more interested in break strength? You know, usually I think most times we're more interested in break strength, but you know, I have noticed that as I've gotten older, not being fast and easy to tie has become a lot more important to me. Trust me on that one. Yeah, as you get older, those priorities might change a bit. So if you ever hear someone, you know, on one of these YouTube videos that says the only knot you'll ever need for fishing, you don't need this is the only knot, that's probably not entirely true. I mean, it's nice to have a knot that serves a lot of purposes, but there's no one single knot that is perfect in every way. And as your priorities change, or just your circumstances change, where you really, really, really think it's important to tie a fast knot, then you might tie something different than if your priority was a strong knot. So think about those things, and we'll talk more next time. Thanks.